Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 305 of CryptoBiography, and it is part 12 of The Brick Wall. And here we go. He prepared himself and left the dressing area of the gym. The gym was full, with everyone looking at him or at Wallopin' Walt, who was across the room. There was a buzz coming from the crowd, but he could hardly hear it for the buzz inside his own head. The excitement of the moment was taking over, just as it had for his 2 sparring matches. But the excitement wasn't enough to unleash him. Bill was the referee in the ring again. This time, another man standing next to him was introducing him and announcing the judges. There were 3 of them. Carson didn't know any of them, but when he had asked Bill about them, Bill had assured him they were as likely to be as fair as anyone he could want. That was good enough for him. The judge introductions went quickly. Then the man swept a dramatic arm towards Carson and said in a clear voice that carried over the crowd, "In this corner, in his first purse match, in the heavyweight division, weighing 262 pounds, Carson, the Brick Wall Brax." The crowd cheered, and Carson climbed up and into the ring. "And in this corner, with a record of 8 wins and no losses, with 5 wins by knockout, weighing 239 pounds, Wallopin' Walt Streech." The crowd cheered even louder as his opponent climbed in the ring. They stared levelly at each other. Carson was nervous. This match would go 15 rounds, not the 5 of the sparring bouts. Lydia was there, he knew, but like the other matches, he didn't want to see her looking up at him. He knew this was going to hurt, and that he might not be able to do enough damage to Streech to win the fight. But at least Bill was refereeing, and he knew Bill would be even-handed, and Bill had also vouched for the judges. Jake might have tilted the table against him, but he was still in a place where he could change the outcome himself. He was somewhere in this thought when Bill had them touch gloves. Then the first bell rang. Wallopin' Walt came charging forward as though he had a train to catch and wanted this over immediately. He swung at Carson's head, and though he blocked it, the hit was so strong that the glove smacked into his head. This was the moment, like the sparring, where his pre-fight feeling of being underwater vanished. He snapped into clarity and started jabbing. Walt kept hitting hard, though. Carson found himself able to see where the punches were coming and defend against them, sometimes blocking, sometimes ducking, sometimes dancing to the side or backward. In return, he was looking for a real opening. He was landing punches, but they seemed to have no effect. Walt was another level tougher than anyone he had fought yet. And yes, part of it was Walt's toughness, but also he knew he had not figured out how to unleash himself. He punched hard, going for a body blow, and really putting his body into the motion. It hit hard, but Walt didn't seem to notice. He kept at it, sometimes getting hit, sometimes hitting, but nothing he did to Walt seemed to stick. He considered going for a body blow offense, like in his last fight. It might work, eventually. The first round bell rang, and he went to his corner. He was already sweating, but didn't feel as tired as he did after the first round in either of his sparring matches. Small victory, he thought. The second round started, and Walt charged forward again. Carson felt several hits land, but still managed to block most of them. He struck out, trying to focus on body blows, but making sure he mixed it up, so that Walt couldn't just keep his defenses low. The round wore on, and he was still able to avoid most of the hits and still land a reasonable amount of his own, yet Walt didn't seem to be affected at all. He was, Carson noticed, barely sweating. The end of the second round came, and he rested. He wasn't sure if his strategy was working, but he was going to keep at it. The third round, it happened. Walt smashed Carson hard in the face halfway through the round after a successful jab that made Carson move his defenses. Dazed, he stumbled back 3 steps under the ropes, and the crowd roared. Walt charged forward, throwing wildly to follow up. Carson covered up and then went into a clinch, forcing Bill to separate them. His head was clearing, but only partly. He went defensive, despite knowing it would put him behind in the round. Right now, he just had to survive the round. Another hard hit caught him on the ear, and balls of light popped in front of his eyes. But he had a strong idea of where Walt was, so he did a hard right jab there. It hit, and though it would have been a harder strike in better circumstances, it got Walt to back off for a moment. They both threw flurries of punches, Walt hoping for a knockout, Carson trying to keep Walt off of him. At the end of the round, he was exhausted. He could only hope that Walt was exhausted as well. He wasn't. The fourth started, and Walt came out swinging, and he kept swinging. Carson did his best to protect and counter. He was finding few openings and was taking strong hits. He hurt in several places and was starting to tire. He kept swinging, though, and hit Walt in the stomach a few times that round. The next rounds followed the same general pattern. Walt may be tiring, and the body blows may be helping, but Carson was wearying faster. In the 12th, he took 3 hits, all closely spaced together. He clinched to get his head on straight, but he knew he was far behind in the judge's eyes, and he didn't know if he could even stop from being knocked out by the 15th. The bell rang, and he went to his corner. He poured water over his head and took a small drink. He would have to become a hood, a small-time criminal, shaking down people for the benefit of a bigger criminal. What would his family think? He thought of their deaths, the smallpox that took their lives. They had pustules spreading across their bodies while they shook in fevers and slipped away. And then he looked across at Walt, and every bump and red mark on his opponent's face seemed to swell and darken until Walt's face seemed to be the living embodiment of smallpox. The bell rang, and instead of Walt charging at him, Carson charged at Walt. He was now fighting as though his opponent had actually taken his family from him. He swung hard, and somehow, though he thought he had been punching at full strength before, he was hitting much, much harder now. Walt stumbled, surprised at the energy Carson had for him. And Carson understood. This is what it felt to get out of the way. This is what it felt like to really punch with meaning. And if he could hit hard before, it was nothing like he was hitting now. He hit Walt high, gave a couple of jabs, and then swung a big, low hook to the body. It hit Walt in the liver, and he immediately went to his knees. A good liver shot can be impossible to recover from, at least within the 10 count a boxer is given. Walt's reddened face was a mask of pain, and Carson just looked down at him, still seeing the embodiment of his family's killer. Bill kept counting, and Walt briefly tried to get up, then fell flat on his belly. He was conscious, but the pain from his liver just would not let him get up. Bill finished the count and shouted, "Winner!" while turning to Carson. He raised Carson's gloved hand. Carson was shocked. The turnaround had been so quick. But he beamed, and when he looked at Walt again, he didn't see smallpox anymore, just his defeated foe who was painfully rolling over onto his back. The roar of the crowd broke through his thoughts, and he looked for Lydia. She was positively jumping up and down in her joy. And that's the end of the episode for this week. Obviously, there's more fights to come. We know that Jake is not done with his little bet with Carson, so that's going to be continuing soon. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm certainly enjoying writing it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or Mastodon. And thanks for listening. Words and music copyright 2023, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.